The only thing your pension should cover is a nursing home, not keeping this house." My daughter-in-law's cold words rang out before 200 guests. I hadn't even reacted when a glass of red wine was flung straight into my face. My whole body trembled, but inside, a door opened. The door to a truth I had hidden for 20 years. My name is Margaret Sullivan, 70 years old, a widow living on the coast of Clearwater, Florida. For more than 15 years, I had lived quietly in a 2-story wooden house facing the sea. It wasn't just a home. It was the place where my husband Thomas and I had built every brick, every memory. After he died of cancer, I chose to continue a modest life, with my old Ford, clothes from discount shops, and a part-time job at a small bakery nearby. To anyone looking in, I was just an ordinary old woman with a modest pension. And that was exactly what I wanted. But that evening, in the glittering banquet hall of the Marriott Hotel, that mask was ripped away. Not because I wanted it, but because of the cruelty of Vanessa, the woman who had officially become my daughter-in-law less than an hour earlier. The guests froze. Some coughed to cover the awkwardness. Others lowered their eyes to avoid mine. But many pairs of eyes stayed fixed, waiting to see how I, the mother-in-law humiliated in public, would react. I wiped the red wine dripping down my chin, my face burning but my heart hurting 100 times more. I turned to my son, Daniel, hoping against hope he would defend his mother. But no. He just stood there, head bowed to the polished wooden floor, his shoulders shaking like a child caught red-handed, but not saying a single word. That image chilled me to my bones. My son, the boy who once clutched my hand when he learned to walk, now stood silent like an accomplice. Vanessa smiled, her smile sharp as a blade. The white wedding gown, glittering with crystals on her shoulders, reflected the chandelier above, making her mocking words even more piercing. "You should be reasonable. You don't need that much space. Daniel and I need that house to start our new life." I stood frozen, the whole hall spinning. In a flash, memories of the past 2 years flooded back. Vanessa mocking my house as old, belittling my car as unsafe, casually prying into my finances under the guise of concern. Now, all of it was laid bare in front of the guests. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply turned and walked out, each step slow, while whispers rippled behind me. Every step crushed my heart, but at the same time, I felt a new fire rising. That glass of wine hadn't just soaked my dress, it had burned away the last shred of patience I had held on to. In the cold hallway leading to the parking lot, I pulled out my phone, my hands still shaking but my eyes growing clear. I dialed a number I hadn't used in years, the number of Mr. Ed Perry, the lawyer who had been with my family for over 30 years. He was the one who knew every secret Thomas and I had kept. "Perry, it's Margaret. I need you at the Marriott Hotel right now. Bring all the documents we prepared. Yes, that file. The time has come." There was silence on the line for a few seconds, then his voice dropped low. "Are you sure, Margaret? Once you go public, there's no turning back." "I've never been more sure," I replied, my voice firm, so steady it surprised even me. I sat in my old Ford, the faded leather scent lingering. The streetlight cast my reflection in the rearview mirror, highlighting the wrinkles of age and the red wine stains still blotched on my skin. But in my eyes, there was no more submission. I thought of Thomas. He had always said, "Margaret, money is only a tool. Never let it control you. But if the day comes when it must be used to defend your dignity, don't hesitate." I had avoided that day, hoping my son would grow wise and cherish his mother as before. But tonight, I understood. My silence had been taken as weakness, and I would not let them take another thing from me, not my house, not my dignity. Outside, the distant sound of waves blended with the cool night breeze. I closed my eyes, replaying the wedding scene. The glass of wine, Vanessa's cruel laugh, Daniel's lowered gaze, and the hundreds of witnesses who said nothing. In that loneliness, I realized one truth. When the world turns its back on you, sometimes that is the very moment you must return to your own inner strength. And that strength, I knew, was in the files Perry was about to bring. In half an hour, when he walked into the parking lot with that briefcase, my life and Daniel and Vanessa's lives would never be the same again. I turned on the radio, an old jazz tune filling the car, reminding me of the nights Thomas and I danced in the living room. I smiled faintly, a mix of bitterness and resolve. They thought I was just a poor old woman living on a pension. They had no idea I was the one holding everything. Leaning back, I whispered, "Vanessa, you've just made the biggest mistake of your life. You'll soon learn what it means to pay for arrogance." In that moment, I saw the future open before me, not one of endurance, but of confrontation. And this time, I would hold the board. As I waited for Perry, memories pulled me back 2 years, to the day Daniel introduced Vanessa. I remembered that afternoon so clearly, the Florida sun shining on the porch, Thomas's chair still in place, and the simple dinner I prepared: roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and the apple pie Daniel had loved since childhood. I wanted their first meal in my home to be warm and welcoming, but the moment Vanessa stepped inside, I sensed something wrong. She glanced around the living room, her eyes betraying disdain. The reupholstered floral sofa, the scratched coffee table Thomas had repaired over and over in Vanessa's eyes. They were outdated, shameful. "Oh, this place. Cozy," she said with a thin smile, her tone like a needle piercing my chest. Daniel, too busy dragging a suitcase, didn't notice the sarcasm. He beamed. "Mom, this is Vanessa. I really hope you two get along." I reached out my hand, forcing a smile. Vanessa's hand was cold, her shake limp, and within seconds she pulled away to adjust her sparkling necklace. I knew right then she was the kind of woman used to glittering lights, not the salty simplicity of my seaside home. Dinner was far from warm. Vanessa picked at her chicken, barely ate, and drank water repeatedly. When I asked about her family, she brushed it off. "My parents run businesses. Nothing special." But when the subject shifted to money, her eyes lit up, curiosity sharp enough to chill me. "How do you manage on just a pension? It must be hard living alone like this, right?" The question cut like a knife. I forced a smile and answered simply, "I get by. It's enough." That night, after cleaning up, I sat by the window staring at the sea, unease rising in me. Not just because of Vanessa's tactless words, but because of Daniel's silence, like he was mesmerized by her presence. My once attentive, sensitive son now felt like a stranger. In the months that followed, every visit brought more jabs. When she saw me in my old floral dress, she chuckled. "Don't you have anything more modern? People these days dress younger." Or when I drove them to the grocery store in my Ford, she sneered. "Is this car even safe anymore? Shouldn't you upgrade?" Daniel didn't defend me, he echoed her. "Mom, maybe she's right. At your age, safety matters more." His words pierced deeper than hers. He no longer knew the difference between genuine concern and disguised insult. Once, when I mentioned my part-time job at the bakery, Vanessa sighed. "At your age, you should be resting. Why are you still working?" Strange. That sentence lodged in my mind. They wanted me to believe I was useless, that I should give up everything: my house, my assets, my right to decide, and let them take over. I chose to stay quiet. I told myself maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe Vanessa was just clumsy with her words. But as time went on, I realized those remarks weren't accidental. They were tiny knives, one cut at a time, aimed at my self-respect. A year passed, and Daniel depended on Vanessa more and more. He started cutting me off at meals, started giving me that annoyed look whenever I offered an opinion. Worst of all, he gradually looked down on the house he grew up in, the home Thomas and I devoted our lives to keeping. I remember one evening on the porch, the two of them sitting together. Vanessa held a real estate magazine, pointed at luxury oceanfront condos, and said, "Daniel, see? These places are so much more modern than your mom's old house." Daniel nodded without pushing back. I looked at my son, hoping for even a small reaction to defend his mother, but all I saw was quiet agreement. In that moment, I knew the roots of the conflict had sunk deeper than I'd imagined. I still remember what Thomas told me before he passed. Never underestimate greed. It can turn family into strangers. Back then, I thought he was too pessimistic. But now, seeing the way Vanessa looked at my house with the eyes of an appraiser, I understood how right Thomas had been. That night, after they left, I walked through each room, touching the family photos on the walls, the old piano where Daniel played his first song. I whispered, "This house will never belong to someone who only sees dollar signs." A resolve rose in me, even though I didn't yet know how I would act on it. But I knew the conflict between me and Vanessa wasn't just words. It was a drawn-out, covert battle, and Daniel, my only child, was taking the other side. One summer evening, I got a call from Daniel. "Mom, we want to stop by this weekend. There's something important to discuss." My son's voice sounded unfamiliar, no longer warm like before. A small wave of dread passed through me. My gut told me this wouldn't be a normal visit. That day, I baked waffles and brewed tea, trying to keep a family feel. But instead of just Daniel and Vanessa, they arrived with her parents. I was surprised, but I still smiled and invited them in. I hadn't even finished setting the table when Vanessa started. "We want to talk seriously about your future and ours." The way she said "we" instead of "I" chilled me. This wasn't a family visit. It felt like a strategy meeting, and I was the problem to be handled. Vanessa's mother, Louise, glanced around the living room and sighed. "Miss Margaret, at your age, living alone in such a big house is too much. You should consider a safer option." Vanessa's father, Richard, jumped in. "We know the manager of an excellent assisted living facility, medical care, meals, community activities. Much more suitable for you." I sat in silence, listening to them go on and on, my eyes fixed on Daniel. My son sat beside his wife, nodding along with every line like an obedient puppet. Vanessa folded her hands, her voice sweet but razor-sharp. "We're about to get married and we want kids. Your house is really too big and empty for one person. If you move into assisted living, it's safer for you and helps us have a place to start." Her words sounded reasonable, but each one hit my ears like a rock. "This house is where Thomas and I built a life. It holds our entire history." And here they were, discussing it like an item to be transferred. I set my teacup down and kept calm. I can still take care of myself, and I have no plans to leave this house. The room tightened like a stretched wire. Louise raised an eyebrow, her tone half pity, half threat. "You need to be realistic. One fall in the bathroom can be dangerous. If you refuse to change, it'll be trouble for everyone." Richard pulled a packet of papers from his pocket and placed it in front of me. "These are average costs for assisted living. With the money from selling your house, you could cover it for decades and still have some left to help Daniel and Vanessa start their life." I looked at the packet, my heart pounding. No doubt about it. This was a planned ambush. They came armed with arguments, evidence, even calculations. Daniel finally spoke, his voice shaky, like he'd memorized the lines. "Mom, I know this is hard, but think of us. Vanessa and I have sacrificed so much for this wedding. All we need is a little help from you." I looked at my son and saw a stranger. Gone was the child who clung to me when he was scared of the dark. Gone was the young man who promised to protect his mother after his father died. In front of me was a man putting his wife and in-laws above his own mother. I gave a small, dry laugh and lowered my voice. "Help? Or take?" The table went dead silent. Vanessa bit her lip, then snapped. "Miss Margaret, don't be negative. This is best for everyone. If you insist, we'll have to find another way." Her eyes flashed cold. I understood exactly what "another way" meant. That wasn't a suggestion. It was a threat. I barely slept that night. I walked through the house, room by room, touching my wedding photo with Thomas, the old piano, the scratches on the floor from when Daniel used to drag chairs as a kid. Everything seemed to whisper, "Don't let anyone take us." The next morning, I took out a small voice recorder. From that day on, whenever Vanessa and Daniel came over, I slipped it in my pocket or set it on the kitchen shelf. I recorded every word, every threat, every time they discussed moving Mom out. I knew that if I was going to fight them, I needed proof. Another evening, Vanessa strode straight into the kitchen and tossed a few assisted living brochures on the table. "Take a look, Mom. You'll have friends, activities. It's much more fun than being alone here." I nodded politely, but inside, my anger burned. I kept those brochures not to consider them, but to add to the evidence of their plan to push me out of my own home. Vanessa grew bolder by the day. She called nonstop, texted to pressure me. Daniel gradually spoke in the same voice. "Mom, Vanessa just cares about you. If you love me, help us get settled." I listened, my heart tightening. Love? What kind of love forces a mother to abandon her memories and her home? That's not love, it's exploitation dressed up as filial piety. I understood they were past snide comments. Now they had a plan, backed by Vanessa's family, and if I didn't prepare, one day they'd really force me out with legal tricks. That night, with the ocean thudding outside my window, I made myself a promise. If they want a war, I'll fight. I won't let my home become their trophy. I once thought I could endure the snide remarks, ignore the side glances, and everything would pass. But after that calculated family meeting, I knew there was no turning back. Vanessa and her family had no intention of appealing to love. They had a plan and were ready to force me out, and if I wavered, it would all be over. I went to my bedroom and opened the wooden wardrobe Thomas had built by hand more than 30 years ago. In the deepest corner, under layers of cloth, was a black metal box. I still wore the small key on a chain around my neck. Inside were documents Thomas and I had kept for years, known to no one, not even Daniel. Sitting on the bed, I opened each folder. The warm glow of the old bedside lamp lit every line and number I'd read hundreds of times, but never without amazement. In front of me wasn't the estate of a middle-class family like people assumed. It was a substantial fortune, the result of Thomas's patient, careful investing. Thomas wasn't just an office worker like everyone believed. He'd been a founding shareholder in an import company, then moved into real estate. When Daniel was little, Thomas and I agreed. Live modestly, hide the truth about our wealth. He told me, "Flaunted wealth brings trouble, Margaret. Quiet wealth truly protects the family." I agreed, and for years we kept a simple front. I worked part-time and drove a plain car. This wooden seaside house, to others just a beach place, was our fortress for keeping secrets. The papers in my hands that night said it all. An office building for rent in downtown Tampa, a luxury condo for short-term rentals, stocks in both our names, and long-term investments worth several $1,000,000. There was also a vacation home in Georgia where Thomas and I had dreamed of retiring. I slowly turned to the last folder, the agreement with Perry, who had managed the investments since Thomas died. Perry knew everything, but respected my wish to keep it private. I'd told him, "Only reveal this if it ever truly becomes necessary." That night, alone in my familiar room, I felt pain mixed with strength. I hurt because Daniel didn't know what I'd done for him. While I guarded our estate and quietly covered his small debts during his early working years, he stood by as his wife and in-laws tried to push his mother out of her home. But I also realized I wasn't powerless. I had tools to fight back, and this time, I wouldn't miss my chance. The next day, I called Perry. We met at a small cafe where he liked to read the paper. When I walked in, he stood to greet me, concern in his eyes. I set the files on the table and said firmly, "It's time to use what Thomas left." Perry sighed, took a sip of coffee and said, "I figured this day would come. Miss Margaret, are you ready? Once the truth is out, your family will never be the same. I have no other choice. They want to turn me into someone incompetent just to steal this house. If I keep staying silent, they'll think I'm truly helpless." We discussed things for nearly 2 hours. Perry would prepare the legal documents, suspend all financial support for Daniel, update the will to move most of the assets into a charitable trust, and have a lawsuit ready if they continued to threaten me. When I left the cafe, I walked slowly, but my heart pounded. All these years, I had kept this secret to protect Daniel, hoping he would live decently by his own efforts. I never imagined a day would come when I'd have to use that very truth against my own son. That night, sitting on the front porch, I watched the waves hit the shore under the moonlight. Each wave reminded me that some things can't be stopped, greed, betrayal, but I could choose how to face them. I told myself, "Thomas, if you were here, you'd do the same." A week later, Daniel and Vanessa came again. As soon as she stepped in, Vanessa threw a stack of documents onto the kitchen table. "Mom, we picked out an assisted living place. It's excellent. You just need to sign off on selling the house, and everything will be taken care of." I looked at the papers without touching them. Calmly, I replied, "I'm not signing anything. And I suggest you both stop before it's too late." Vanessa laughed, a smile sharp as a knife. "You think you have a choice? If we have to, we'll prove you're no longer lucid enough to make decisions." I looked straight into her eyes, for the first time without avoiding them. "Then get ready, because I'm ready too." In that moment, Vanessa hesitated. Maybe she realized my eyes no longer held the usual patience. I said nothing more. I knew the real battle had begun, and I held a weapon they'd never imagined. That night, I opened the metal box again and laid each document neatly on the desk. The warm lamplight fell across the cold but powerful numbers, several $1 million in accounts, property lease contracts, valuable stocks. I whispered, "This isn't just money. It's proof I am not weak. This will be the shield that protects my dignity." After that tense confrontation, I understood I couldn't just play defense. To fight Vanessa and her entire family, I needed to know their reality, how much debt, what they lived on, and why they were so determined to get this house. Only by knowing the truth could I prepare a counterstrike. I thought of Linda, my college friend, now a financial consultant at a major firm in Tampa. Linda is sharp, direct, and absolutely discreet. We hadn't seen each other in years, but our friendship never faded. I called her, my voice soft but resolute. "Linda, I need your help. This is life and death for me. Just tell me." "I'm here for you, Margaret." I met Linda at a small cafe on the corner of the old downtown. When she saw me, she hugged me tight, then studied my tired face. I told her everything: the family meeting, the threats, the plan to send me to assisted living. Linda listened, her eyes darkening. "I'll check. I have a way to see Daniel and Vanessa's credit situation and financial records. But Margaret, are you sure? The truth can be brutal." "I need it, Linda. I have to know what they're plotting." 3 days later, Linda called, urgency in her voice. "Margaret, we need to meet in person." I found things you wouldn't believe. I drove my old Ford to her office. Linda had a thick red folder ready on the table. She slid it to me, her tone dropping low. "Brace yourself." I opened the file. Each page felt like a knife to the chest. Daniel and Vanessa were drowning in debt. First, the credit cards, 5 different cards, with a total balance of over $80,000. My hands shook as I read line after line. Luxury fashion stores, high-end restaurants, a trip to Cancun, extravagant gifts. Nothing essential, just indulgence. Next were the car loans. Two new Mercedes, with monthly payments of nearly $1,200 each. Daniel's salary, only $45,000 a year, clearly couldn't cover it. Their downtown Tampa apartment was also 3 months past due. Eviction loomed. I turned to the last section. Linda had marked it in red: total debt, more than $150,000, not counting the wedding loan. I let go, the folder slipping onto the table as my vision blurred. My heart clenched, not at the numbers but at my son, the boy I raised with sweat and tears, letting his life sink this far. Linda gently placed a hand on my shoulder. "Margaret, they're playing a desperate game. And the trump card is your house. If they get it, they'll sell it immediately to pay off the debt. There's no future or family happiness here. Just desperation and greed." I sat in silence, my head spinning. My heart tore in two: pity for my son and a deep, aching anger. Daniel should have honored the value of hard work, but instead of learning, he let Vanessa drag him into a pit of debt. That night, I went home and sat in a dark living room, the only sound the ocean outside the window. I spread the papers across the table and stared at the cold numbers. They read like a verdict. I saw Daniel as a little boy running in the yard, laughing with bright, hopeful eyes. Now, in these pages, he existed only as a desperate debtor. I picked up a pen and wrote a few lines in the journal Thomas left me. "Our son has lost his way. He thinks he can take his mother's house to save his life. But he doesn't know that inside this house, I've kept the faith and the strength to fight back." The next day, I met with Perry. I set the file on his desk and told him what Linda had found. He nodded, thoughtful. "I suspected as much. Now we have evidence. If they dare sue, we'll use these debts to show the real motive: greed and exploitation." Perry advised me not to act rashly. He'd prepare the legal filings, and I would keep pretending I knew nothing, letting Vanessa and Daniel expose more of their plan. I agreed. Walking out of his office, I felt both heavy and relieved. Heavy because my son had sunk so far, relieved because I was finally no longer in the dark. In the days that followed, I watched closely. Every time they visited, I noticed the details: Vanessa's brand new designer heels, the gleam of Daniel's watch. I no longer saw a mere showing off. I saw the signs of desperation dressed up. One evening, when Daniel stepped outside to take a call, I overheard Vanessa whispering in the kitchen to her mother on the phone, "Once we get the house, we'll pay everything off and buy a new condo. She's weak, she'll give in soon." I turned away, my heart like ice. But this time, instead of shaking, I felt a sharp clarity flood my veins. I knew I was no longer just a victim. I was becoming the main player in the game they thought I'd abandoned. That night, I opened the file again, took out paper and pen, and wrote a simple plan: recordings keep evidence, prepare to go public. I wrote it clearly, each word like a nail. I also began calling a few old friends who had worked with Thomas. They knew how he invested, and they were willing to testify if needed. I gathered each piece, building the larger picture. Before, I only saw Vanessa as cruel and Daniel as weak. But now I saw more clearly. Both were trapped in their own debt snare. And instead of choosing decency to climb out, they chose to sacrifice the mother. I closed the file and exhaled. Night draped over the house, but inside me, a light had begun to glow. I held the truth in my hands, and when the time came, that truth would cut through every illusion they'd built. That afternoon, the wind off Tampa Bay blew harder than usual. The sky was heavy with gray clouds, and waves pounded the rocks behind the house like drums warning of trouble. I sat in the living room with a cup of chamomile tea gone cold, eyes on the window. Deep down, I sensed a real storm, not offshore, but in this family was about to hit. Right on cue, there was a knock. Vanessa came in, not bothering to hide her usual arrogance. A tight red dress, high heels clicking on the polished wood floor. Daniel followed, tense, still letting his wife lead. Vanessa didn't sit. She stood in the center of the room as if to claim it all. "Margaret, I'm not here to beat around the bush. Our wedding is in 1 week. Daniel and I have decided this house is the best wedding gift you can give." I set my cup down and looked calmly into her ambition-bright eyes. "A wedding gift? Vanessa, do you understand what this house means to me? It's not a trinket for a party." She laughed, a shrill sound slicing through the room. "Meaning? For a woman pushing 70, does meaning matter more than reality? You can't manage a house this big. Better let us use it. It's not like you need much anymore." Daniel shifted, as if wanting to speak, then stayed silent when Vanessa gripped his hand. I saw a flicker of concern in my son's eyes, weak as a candle about to go out. I stayed still, not angry like before. My calm made Vanessa bristle. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a threat. "If you keep clinging to this house, don't blame us for finding another way. You know, at your age, a few doctor's notes are enough for a judge to say you can't make decisions. Then you'll lose everything." Each word pierced like a cold needle. But instead of trembling, I smiled not with joy, but with bitter resolve. "You've got your script ready, don't you, Vanessa? But you forgot one thing. I'm not that easy to handle." I stood and looked straight at Daniel. "Son, do you really agree with what your wife just said? Do you see your mother as a burden, someone to use and discard?" Daniel kept his head down and said nothing. That silence hurt more than any accusation. I sighed and turned away, not wanting them to see my eyes welling up. Vanessa took Daniel's silence as a victory. She sneered. "Good, then we're in agreement. After the wedding, you'll sign the transfer papers and we'll handle everything. In return, you can live somewhere smaller and quieter. Everybody wins." She spun on her heel, her stiletto clicks cracking through the empty room. Daniel followed, but before stepping out, he glanced back at me, his eyes lost, as if begging for help, yet no words came. The door closed, leaving a heavy silence behind. I dropped into a chair, my hands trembling. Not from fear, but from a surge of pain. I had waited for Daniel to take my side, just once, and once again my son chose silence. Night fell, and the sky grew darker. Distant thunder rolled in, warning that a real storm was coming in from the bay. I walked slowly to my bedroom and opened the old safe in the closet, the one I hadn't touched since Thomas died. My hand brushed the cold metal, my heart equal parts anxious and resolved. The key turned once, and the safe door clicked open with a heavy sound. Inside, along with a few yellowed photo albums, was a brown leather folder Thomas had told me about before he passed. "If you ever feel cornered, open it. Everything you need to protect yourself is in here." I pulled the folder out and set it on the table. The leather was worn but still sturdy. I opened it to neat pages: property deeds, stock certificates, savings accounts, investment contracts. The total value far exceeded anything Daniel and Vanessa could imagine. I read each page carefully and felt how clearly Thomas had anticipated the future. He knew this world wasn't short on people willing to use tricks to take what isn't theirs, even family. And he had left me the tools to fight back. There were handwritten letters, too, his familiar slanted script. "Margaret, never think living modestly is weakness. It's your greatest strength. But when you must, use the truth to protect yourself. These assets aren't just money. They're the belief that you deserve to live with freedom and respect." By then, tears were sliding down my face. I traced his handwriting, as if his warmth were still there. A new strength rose in me, not from anger, but from love and fairness. I organized the documents and tucked them into a small leather bag. Then I wrote a few lines in my notebook. "Tomorrow the storm will come. I'm ready. If they want to turn a wedding day into a day of theft, then that very day will be the day they learn about consequences. They think I'm weak, but they don't know I am Margaret, the woman who never bows." Outside, rain began to patter on the roof tiles. I closed the notebook and sat by the window, watching a black sky split by lightning. The storm was truly coming out there and inside my own family. But this time, I wasn't the one trembling and waiting. I was the one prepared to face it. Daniel and Vanessa's wedding day arrived in the sticky heat of early Florida summer. "I wore a simple navy dress," Thomas once said, "fits your eyes best." My makeup was light, nothing fancy, but in the mirror I saw a different woman, calm, with fire in her eyes. The luxury hotel hosting the reception blazed with lights. More than 100 guests milled about. The laughter and clinking glasses created a glamorous buzz. But when I stepped into the ballroom, a ripple of silence passed through. I knew many still remembered Vanessa's insinuations. "Daniel's mom is old and forgetful, can't manage anything." Those rumors had spread faster than I expected. I chose a table near the back. No one greeted me. No one dared come over. I quietly watched my son in a tailored tuxedo and Vanessa, radiant in a flowing white gown. They looked like the perfect couple to bring everyone else, but I knew the truth. When the vows ended and confetti popped, Vanessa glanced at me, a spark of challenge in her eyes. I gave a small smile only she would understand. I could feel it. The moment to flip the board had come. As the first dance began, I stood. My heels clicked on the wood floor, drawing a few looks. I didn't need a microphone, but I walked to the DJ table and took one with a calm that felt almost cold. "Sorry for the interruption," I said clearly. "I'm Margaret Wallace, the groom's mother." The noise dropped. Curious eyes turned toward me. Vanessa frowned, and Daniel looked rattled. I took a deep breath and pulled from my purse the file I'd carefully prepared the night before. "Tonight we celebrate a marriage, but it's also the night I must speak the truth. For months I've been called old, useless, even threatened with losing control of my own assets. I stayed silent, hoping my son would understand. But my silence was taken as weakness. Whispers spread across the room. I opened the folder and kept my voice steady. "These papers prove I'm neither helpless nor broke, as some have claimed. I own an office building in Tampa, a short-term rental condo, stocks, and other assets. All legal, all transparent." I held some pages up. A few guests exchanged stunned looks. Vanessa went pale and hurried toward me, hissing through her teeth, "What are you doing, you crazy old woman?" I turned the mic toward her so everyone could hear. "What I should have done from the beginning. Your pension should only pay for a nursing home, not for keeping this house." "Your words, Vanessa." The room erupted in murmurs. Some guests raised their phones to record. Vanessa lost her composure. The makeup on her carefully painted face couldn't hide her panic. Before I could react, a glass of red wine was thrown straight into my face. The hot liquid ran down my collar and soaked my dress. The whole room froze. I heard someone whisper, "My God, what did they just do to the groom's mother?" Vanessa seemed to snap, while Daniel stepped forward, his voice breaking. "Mom, why are you saying this only now?" I took a handkerchief from my purse, slowly wiped the wine away, and looked straight into my son's shame-filled eyes. But all I felt was sadness, because I hoped you'd see me with love, not calculation. But you let your wife and her family pull your strings. The air was tight as a drawn wire. I set the folder on a nearby table and pulled out a few pages bank transfers. Over the past 3 years, I quietly paid more than $120,000 of debt for Daniel and Vanessa rent, credit cards, even tonight's wedding costs my money. And what did I get in return? A plan to force me out of my house and even build a case that I'm incompetent. A wave of shock rolled through the room. An older guest shook his head and muttered to the person beside him. Someone blurted out, "Shameful." Vanessa shrieked, her voice harsh, "Don't listen to her. She's making this up to ruin my wedding." I stayed calm and handed the mic to a man behind me, Joseph, my trusted neighbor whom I'd asked to attend. He stepped up, holding his phone. "I have the video. I personally saw Vanessa bring a real estate agent to measure Miss Margaret's house, without telling her. On his screen, the footage was clear. Vanessa in my yard, talking to a man with a measuring pad. The whispers swelled again, this time charged with anger. Vanessa stumbled, nearly falling, and Daniel went stone still. I took back the mic, my voice low but firm. I had no intention of wrecking my son's happiness, but if that happiness is built on lies and greed, it was rotten from the start. And tonight, you have all seen it. For a moment, the ballroom froze, then chairs scraped, and guests began to leave. Some shook their heads, others looked at Daniel with pity. My son, dressed to perfection, collapsed into a chair like he'd lost everything. Vanessa sobbed, her expensive makeup smeared. I folded the documents, slipped them into my purse, and turned for the door. No one stopped me. No one dared whisper behind my back. Each step I took sounded like stamping the end of a hollow, gaudy play. Outside, a hot wind blew, scattering leftover ribbons. I took a deep breath. The heavy night air felt easier somehow. I knew the battle wasn't over. But in that moment, I had reclaimed the most precious thing, my dignity and my voice. The ballroom fell into chaos the moment I left the mic. Chairs scraped, whispers mixed with harsh comments. Some guests kept recording, others shook their heads and left their tables. I stood tall, gripping my file, and without shouting, every word I'd said sliced through the mask Daniel and Vanessa had worked so hard to build. Vanessa stood in the middle of the room, white as a sheet, her expensive makeup streaking with sweat and tears. She screamed, trying to salvage the moment. "Don't believe her. This is just a performance to destroy my happy day." But her voice shook out of control. Guests looked at each other. No one stepped up to defend her. Daniel looked drained, gripping a chair, eyes locked on the documents I'd held up. I had never seen my son so weak or so unfamiliar. A middle-aged guest, likely one of Daniel's business contacts, stood and spoke sternly. "Daniel, did you really let your mother cover all the expenses? So all that bragging, was it her money?" The question hit Daniel like a slap. He didn't answer, just bowed his head, lips trembling. Vanessa rushed in, and the more she spoke, the more shameless she sounded. "We didn't force her. She did it on her own because she loves her son, and now she's lying to humiliate me. How disgraceful." I stepped closer, my voice calm but clear. "If it was voluntary, why did you hire a lawyer to prepare papers to put me in a nursing home? If I'm so weak, why discuss declaring me incompetent to seize my house?" The whole hall fell silent. I saw a few people raise their phones. I knew these clips would be online within hours. Vanessa's mouth hung open, but she couldn't argue back. Then, suddenly, a clap came from the back of the room. Joseph, my close neighbor whom I'd asked to testify, stood up, phone in hand. I saw with my own eyes Vanessa bringing a broker to measure Miss Margaret's house. "Here's the recording. If needed, I'll submit it to the court." He cast the video onto the nearby screen. The image was clear. Vanessa on my porch, pointing out corners to a strange man. The crowd buzzed. Someone even let out a mocking whistle. Daniel held his head and slumped into a chair. I heard someone whisper, loud enough to make out every word, "A lifetime raising a child, only to be betrayed like this." I took a deep breath and spoke firmly. "I'm cutting all financial support from this moment on. Every transfer, every guarantee, and every lease in my name is terminated. From today, Daniel and Vanessa will have to live on their own." That declaration fell like the final blow. Vanessa burst into tears and lunged for Daniel's arm. "Say something, get up and defend your wife." But Daniel stayed put, eyes bloodshot, lips moving without words. Maybe he'd just realized the lavish life of the past few years was a sandcastle I built for him, and I had just knocked it down. I gathered the documents and turned to leave. Right then, the hotel manager, Mr. Martinez, stepped onto the stage, his voice firm. "Please be advised, the guarantee for tonight's event has been canceled. Without an alternative form of payment, we will have to stop service immediately." The noise exploded at once. Many guests stood up, afraid to get dragged into trouble. A few servers started clearing tables. Before the courses were finished, Vanessa screamed, grabbing at the manager. "No way, this is my wedding day, you can't do this." "Mr." Martinez's expression didn't change. "Ma'am, the contract is very clear. Miss Margaret is the guarantor. Now that she's cancelled, we have no grounds to continue." I stood below the stage, watching the chaos with a mix of bitterness and relief. Bitter that my son had let his big day turn into a joke. Relieved because at last I had stopped being their umbrella. A few guests came to shake my hand and whisper, "You did the right thing. You're very brave." I nodded, thanked them, and walked toward the exit. Behind me, Vanessa's shrill voice still echoed, "You'll regret this. The whole world will think you're a monster who abandoned her own son." I paused, turned back, and met her eyes. "No, Vanessa, the world will see a woman who stood up when she was betrayed. And the lesson today, you and Daniel will pay for it." I left the ballroom and stepped into the hotel courtyard, where warm yellow lights glowed. The night breeze was cool on my shoulders. Above, the black clouds had cleared, revealing a cold, bright moon. I looked up, my heart heavy but proud. Because I knew this shocking reversal didn't just end that hollow pageant, it opened a new chapter, one where I would no longer stay silent. After that chaotic wedding night, my little house by the sea became a peaceful refuge. The waves still rolled in, the wind still moved through the palms, but inside I knew the real storm wasn't over. With their personalities and ambition, Daniel and Vanessa wouldn't give up easily. Only 3 days later, my doorbell rang hard and fast. When I opened it, a uniformed courier stood there with a thick envelope stamped by the court. My chest tightened. I signed for it, brought it to the kitchen, and set it on the old wooden table. The words were clear. Preliminary summons, petition 2. Evaluate the civil capacity of Miss Margaret Wallace. I dropped into a chair and took a long breath. This was the Plan B Vanessa had threatened. When they couldn't force me to sign the house over, they chose something crueler. Prove I was incompetent to legally seize control. The paperwork included a few statements. I read them, half angry, half amused. Some wedding guests had signed that I acted erratically, disrupted the ceremony, showed signs of financial delusion. They claimed I shouted in the hall, that I declared ridiculous numbers. There were even signatures from 2 neighbors I barely knew, saying I'd been muttering on the porch and seemed forgetful. I held the packet, my hands shaking not from fear, but from fury. How horrifying that people who share your blood would stage a script to steal a lifetime of work from their own mother. That night, I called Perry. After listening, his voice dropped. "I figured they'd go this route, but don't worry, we have evidence." "But Perry," I said, "they got people to sign." "On paper, I look like a senile old woman. That's just surface. We'll flip it. I'll arrange for a top psychiatrist to evaluate you formally, and that report will be our strongest shield." I sat quietly for a moment, listening to the ocean outside. Perry was right. I couldn't let them turn truth into lies with a stack of phony statements. The next day, Joseph stopped by. He brought his phone and showed me, "Margaret, you need to see this. The wedding video is everywhere. People are on your side. They're calling you brave for exposing the lies right in the middle of the party." The screen filled with comments. "Strongest woman I've ever seen. This isn't senility. This is clarity." My eyes stung as I read them. Public opinion can change in a heartbeat, but in that moment, those words gave me strength. Still, I knew Daniel and Vanessa wouldn't leave it there. And I was right. 3 days later, Vanessa showed up with an older couple, her parents. They stood in my front yard, their faces smug. Vanessa spoke first, her voice icy. "Miss Margaret, we're here to inform you. Our attorney has filed. In a few weeks, the court will decide." You'll no longer have control over any assets. I folded my arms and answered simply, "Go ahead and try. I have an attorney, too." Her father jumped in, condescending, "You should just cooperate." Courts tend to believe a group of statements. The more you resist, the more dignity you'll lose. I looked them straight in the eye and didn't lower my voice. My dignity isn't yours to take, and those false statements will turn back on you. They left in a huff, but I knew the next blow would come soon. As expected, the following week my phone lit up with calls from unknown numbers, mostly reporters. News of a case about a son and daughter-in-law seeking guardianship over an elderly mother started leaking to the press. Some headlines were deliberately vague. 68-year-old mother delusional about million-dollar assets? The words made my heart ache, but I refused to break. I met Perry at his office. On the walnut table, he'd already laid out papers. "This is Dr. Simmons's medical report. You're fully competent, no cognitive decline. We'll submit it directly to the court." I held the report, eyes watery. The printed conclusion was clear. Patient Margaret Wallace, 68 years old, possesses full cognitive and decision-making capacity. "No signs of dementia," Perry continued. "We also have video evidence of Vanessa's actions. With public sentiment leaning your way, I believe they'll pay for this reckless move." I nodded, though my heart was still heavy. Even so, a flame in me burned brighter. I remembered Thomas's words, "When needed, use the truth to protect yourself." Yes, the truth was the only weapon I needed. That night, I sat on the porch under the moonlight over the water. I thought of Daniel. A small, fragile hope still flickered that he'd wake up and see he'd gone too far. But the memory of his bowed head at the wedding washed that hope away like sand through my fingers. Softly, I said to myself, "If this is your plan B, then be ready for my counterattack." Out there, the waves kept pounding strong and steady. Just like my resolve, I would not be swept away. The first court date arrived faster than I expected. That morning, I wore something simple, a white blouse, dark slacks, black shoes I'd had for years. I wanted people to see me as I am an ordinary, clear-minded woman, not the senile old lady Daniel and Vanessa tried to paint. Perry picked me up early. He stepped out of the car, calm expression, eyes full of determination. "Miss Margaret, today matters, but I know you're ready." I nodded, gripping the case file with everything in it. "I've been waiting for this day, Perry, not for revenge, but to prove the truth." The county courthouse gleamed in the Florida Sunday. The steps to the main doors felt taller than usual, but I climbed them steady and sure. In the hallway, I spotted Daniel and Vanessa with their attorney. Vanessa wore an expensive business dress, hair pinned up, face set in a mask of confidence. Daniel looked exhausted, eyes avoiding mine. When our eyes finally met, I saw something in him, part dim regret, part stubborn defiance. The hearing began. The room was packed, not just parties involved, but some reporters too. The last few weeks had turned this into a hot story. I sat at the respondents' table beside Perry. Across from us were Daniel and Vanessa. Their attorney started first, smooth and polished. "Your Honor, we filed this petition out of concern for Miss Wallace's mental health and decision-making capacity. Her recent behavior disrupting a wedding, making unfounded financial claims, suggests she's no longer competent to manage her assets." They rolled out statements from a few witnesses. A neighbor said I often forgot to lock the door. A wedding guest claimed I shouted irrationally. Listening, I felt the weight of it, but I didn't waver. Perry tapped my hand lightly, a reminder. Steady. "Our turn is coming." When it was, Perry stood. He spread the documents on the lectern and spoke firmly. "Your Honor, we submit the medical report from Dr. Simmons, a nationally recognized psychiatrist. The conclusion is clear. Miss Margaret Wallace is fully competent, with complete cognitive and decision-making capacity. A murmur rose in the courtroom. Perry continued. We also have video evidence showing Miss Vanessa Dawson, Miss Wallace's daughter-in-law, bringing a real estate agent to measure Miss Wallace's home without her consent. We further have records of calls and documents showing Mr. Daniel Hughes inquiring months ago about procedures to obtain guardianship over his mother's assets. He paused and looked straight at the judge. This is not a son's concern for his mother. This is an organized attempt to seize assets. I saw Vanessa start to fidget, her face flushing red. Daniel dropped his head, fingers laced tight. When I was called to the stand, I stood and took a deep breath. My voice didn't shake. It was clear and measured. Your Honor, I stayed silent for too long. I thought if I endured, things would settle down, but silence turned me into a victim. On my son's wedding night, I was humiliated in front of hundreds, accused of selfishness, threatened with a nursing home. I had no choice but to tell the truth. I opened my case file and held out bank statements. Over the past 3 years, I transferred more than $120,000 to cover credit cards, rent, and even the wedding expenses for Daniel and Vanessa. I did it because I thought I was helping, but they treated me like a bottomless bank. When I refused to hand over my house, they decided to declare me incompetent. My voice tightened, but I continued, I'm not here to fight my son. I'm here to defend the truth and to protect the dignity of a mother who spent her life for her child. The courtroom grew heavy. I saw a few reporters bend over their notebooks, scribbling fast. The other side's attorney tried to jump in, claiming I was acting competent on purpose. But Perry immediately played the video of my interview with Dr. Simmons, me answering clearly, recalling dates, even reciting by heart a poem Thomas had loved. No one could call me delusional after that. The judge looked over the file, then tapped the gavel lightly. The court needs time for careful review. For now, all of Miss Margaret Wallace's asset management rights remain intact. The court will also open a preliminary inquiry into possible false statements by the plaintiff's witnesses. A wave of murmurs rippled through the room. Vanessa practically screamed, "This isn't fair! She's fooling everyone!" The judge hit the gavel again, stern. "Order in the court!" I sat down, feeling lighter. It was only the first step, but I knew the door to justice had opened. When I left the courthouse, a group of reporters came over. They asked if I was afraid of losing my family's love. I kept it short. Love can't survive on greed and lies. I still love my son, but I can't love betrayal. That night, back home on the porch, I listened to the waves. My heart still hurt, but in that pain was peace. I had dared to stand up, to bring the truth into the light. I knew this was only the beginning of the fight, but I wasn't alone anymore. Outside, the night sky glittered with stars. I whispered to Thomas, "You see, I did the right thing, and I'll keep going until they understand that greed has a price." On the day of the final ruling, Tampa's sky was a deep blue, the sun shining bright as if to wash away the last of the gloom. I climbed the marble steps into the courthouse, lighter than I'd felt in months. I'd lived under crushing tension between love and betrayal, trust and fear. But today, I could feel a new beginning waiting. The judge read the verdict, voice clear, each word hitting straight to my heart. After reviewing all evidence and testimony, the court denies the guardianship petition of Daniel Hughes and Vanessa Dawson. Due to signs of fraud, the court refers the file to the district attorney for further investigation. Miss Margaret Wallace retains full control of her assets and is recognized as fully competent. The gavel struck, sharp and dry, but to me it was the most beautiful music I had ever heard. Vanessa dropped into her seat, eyes wide. Daniel covered his face, shoulders shaking like he couldn't believe what he'd heard. I looked at my son, my heart ached, but no longer the way it once did. Some lessons a person has to pay for themselves. Outside, reporters waited. Cameras flashed, microphones pointed at me. I smiled and kept it brief. Justice isn't revenge, it's protection. Today I was protected not just by the law, but by the truth. That line ran in several papers the next morning. A few even called me the woman who challenged ageist stereotypes. I'm not used to media lights, but I felt strangely calm. I wasn't a silent victim anymore. In the days that followed, I returned to my routine in the house by the sea. Each morning I took my coffee to the porch and watched the waves. The gulls chattered. The salty wind brushed my face. Little things worry had buried, now precious again. I felt reborn. One afternoon, Joseph stopped by with a small radio. He set it on the kitchen table and played a jazz tune Thomas loved. The familiar sound filled the room and my eyes stung. Joseph smiled gently. "Margaret, you fought through a hard war. Now let music and friends bring you back to life." I nodded, tears falling as I smiled. After all this time, I realized what I needed wasn't the money, it was peace in my heart, the ability to hold my head high. I also joined a local community group, older adults sharing stories of financial or emotional abuse by family. I told my journey, from insults to plans for a nursing home, to the moment I stood in court. People listened, some cried, some squeezed my hand and whispered, "You gave us hope that we can protect ourselves, too." I never thought I'd be anyone's support. But that made one thing clear: my pain wasn't unique. So many elders suffer quietly because they believe old people should stay silent. I can't change everything, but I can start small, share, and lift others up. Daniel disappeared from my life for a long time. I heard rumors he and Vanessa fought constantly over mounting debt, eventually leaving their fancy apartment for a smaller rental. I heard it with a quiet sadness. My son chose that path. Now he had to learn to stand on his own feet. One evening, I got a short letter with no return address, the handwriting shaky. "Mom, I'm sorry. I let greed blind me. I'm not brave enough to face you yet, but I hope one day you'll forgive me." I read it over and over, tears blotting the page. Forgive him? I didn't know when my heart would be wide enough for that. But at least I knew Daniel had begun to see his mistake. That was a small light in the dark. I folded the letter and put it in the wooden box holding our family keepsakes. I didn't want to erase the past. It had forged me into the woman I am now. Each morning when sunlight pours through the living room window, my chest opens. I started writing my story not as an indictment, but as a message to those in the same place. Don't let anyone steal your voice, not even family. Silence is a one-way ticket to the pain, despair. Stand up even late is still on time. With each page, I felt reborn. No longer the trembling woman at a wedding, nor the cornered defendant in court. I am Margaret Wallace, a mother, a widow, and above all, a person who knows the true worth of dignity and freedom. Life can be rough seas, but after the storm, the water is still blue and so is my heart. From the day I walked out of the courthouse with a just ruling, my life turned a page. No more midnight nightmares, no flinching at a knock on the door or a strange envelope. I returned to simple rhythms: a hot coffee at dawn, waves on the rocks, afternoon walks on soft, damp sand. Ordinary things, now priceless. A young reporter once came to interview me. She sat across from me, eyes bright, voice full of admiration. "Miss Margaret, do you think you're a hero? You stood up to your family and told the truth." I smiled and shook my head. I'm not a hero. I'm a mother who stayed too quiet, and when silence nearly destroyed everything, I had to speak. Anyone can do that, if they truly believe they deserve respect. After she left, I sat with my thoughts. What I gained wasn't just a legal win. The biggest thing I found was my own voice, the one I'd lost in years of keeping my head down. I remember that night at the safe, opening Thomas's letters. He wrote, "Silence can be strength, but when others turn it into a weapon against you, you must answer with the truth." I did exactly what he hoped I would. People in the community kept coming. They told their stories, mothers manipulated by their children, old men belittled by daughters-in-law, grandmothers pushed to the edges of their own homes. Each story hurt, but I didn't feel hopeless anymore. I started sharing what I'd learned. Seek help, speak up, keep evidence. One evening, the group asked me to speak. I looked out at the many lined faces and worried eyes, and I spoke from the heart. We are not invisible. We are not burdens. We are people who have lived, loved, and sacrificed. No one has the right to take our dignity, not even those who share our blood. Remember, when we stay silent, we hand them power. When we speak, we take ourselves back. Applause filled the room. I saw red eyes and clasped hands. In that moment, I knew my story wasn't just mine. It echoed for thousands living the same pain. Daniel still hasn't returned. I don't know where he is, what he's doing, or whether he's escaped the debt spiral, but I'm not haunted anymore. I've left a space in my heart for him, the small hope that one day he'll truly wake up. Even if that day never comes, I'm okay. I've learned to love myself first. One morning, I walked along the beach, fine sand sliding between my toes, waves brushing my ankles. The sunrise cast gold across the water. I breathed deep, alive, and full. I whispered to myself, "Margaret, you've been reborn." Yes, reborn not because I'm young again, but because I found an inner strength I never knew I had. I don't shake at insults or fear legal schemes. I've seen the darkest stretch, and from there, I found my light. I started journaling daily, capturing thoughts and memories. Maybe one day I'll gather them into a small book, not to sell, but to give to those who need hope. I want them to know that even when pressed by those closest to you, you can still stand up and walk your own path. And today, as I write this, I want to leave one final message to anyone listening to my story. Never believe you're too old to stand up for yourself. Don't let silence turn into shackles. Remember, your dignity and freedom belong to you. No one can take them unless you hand them over. If I, a 68-year-old woman once labeled senile, could find justice, you can too. Speak up, seek help, and believe you're worthy. I closed the notebook and looked out at the open sea. The sun had climbed high, lighting the long ribbon of sand ahead. I smiled, full of gratitude for Thomas, for the friends who walked with me, and for myself, for refusing to give up. And if you're hearing this, I just want to say, thank you for staying with me. My story might be someone's pain and someone else's hope. If you've been through something similar, share your thoughts. I'd love to hear them. And if this story touched you, please subscribe and turn on notifications so voices like ours never fade into silence. I pressed my hands together and whispered, "Thank you, life, for a second chance." Out there, the waves kept rolling and steadfast, a reminder. Life can knock you down, but if you stand back up, you come out stronger than ever.